Jennifer, you've been following this story for us, and I know that you shared some updated information. We've learned more about Chad Wheeler's past, and it is disturbing. And I know that you're going to go into that. And then none of us here like to pat ourselves on our back, and we're all really self-critical of the Malcontentment team. But you should pat yourself on your back for part two. Of course, I know you'll do it with dignity and all that other stuff because this is two parts to this story. But with that, Jennifer, I'm going to hand it over to you and continue to unpack this really disturbing Chad Wheeler story.
Yeah, so we've been covering Chad Wheeler since the news broke that he assaulted his partner back in late January. But some other reporting has come out about him having previous altercations in the past. In fact, when he was at USC playing football back in 2015, he actually had an altercation with the police when LA police were called to a man's home around 8:45 Pacific time in the morning. He was actually caught punching. He'd been punching walls and windows, injured his hands. They thought maybe he'd been under the influence of drugs. He was identified, of course, as Chad Wheeler. He was a junior at that time, an offensive lineman at UFC. He ran out of the apartment after hitting at the walls and windows. He was confronted by officers, got into an altercation with them, and was hit with a round of beanbags. Sources did not go into detail about the exact nature of what led police to use beanbag rounds on him, which is, of course, a less lethal form of force. He was not actually arrested, but was at that time transported to a local hospital and was held under protective custody for psychiatric evaluation. We know through the court filings and some of his own kind of speaking out on Twitter, and also, of course, from I'm not going to call her a victim, she's a survivor, Aaliyah Taylor, that he had issues with bipolar disorder and had gone off his medication. And, it has been partly been attributed to a manic episode. But he appears has had issues in the past, both with violence and mental health issues. Said no officers were hurt in the scuffle, but he did have a girlfriend and a 7-month-old baby. And she was briefly detained and released, but the baby had been given to a family member. So this is not the incident with Aaliyah Taylor was not the first encounter Chad Wheeler has had with the police, where he had been violent and assumed to be having mental health issues. So we talked a lot about when we were reporting on this, that domestic abusers generally aren't, this is not usually a one-off thing. There's usually a history of it, or it's usually concurrent. It may not be with the same partner, but there usually is some kind of episodic violence in the past. And here we're kind of seeing that come to light with the 2015 reports of Wheeler's violence and encounter with the police.
Yeah, Jennifer, when you first reported this story, that was one of my first points of feedback was somebody doesn't jump from nice guy to literally almost murdering somebody.
Yeah.
There is a progression that happens here. So when you in your research were like, oh, look, this has come out. I can't say that I'm surprised. I don't know enough about Chad Wheeler's football career to know where was he at in 2015. We certainly can't. I don't think it's. I don't want to assume, but I don't think it's a big leap to go. He was probably at that time a star athlete somewhere if he became an NFL player. And it just feels like if they went to beanbag rounds, that's somebody really out of control. And that also generally, like the beanbag gun, that isn't something that like every officer has. That generally is requiring a specialized response. And so then the question comes, did he get specialized treatment because of his connections? Was it an NFL player at the time? But whether that be through high school or university, or, hey, if you're going to ruin this guy's career, he's got a bright future And if you do this, you're going to ruin his career, and you're not going to be able to do anything. So what can we put in this hand to go like this? That's what it feels like.
No, absolutely, and it's quite reminiscent of what happened at Stanford. Um, if you recall, there was a Brock. His name was Brock. I can't remember his last name at the time. Who got caught raping a very drunk woman in an alley, and the judge basically said, "Well, we don't want to ruin his career or ruin his life," and so gave him a very, very minimal sentence, which was subject to a lot of course, obvious shock and ridicule. And so it feels very similar to that. And I've read several variations of the 2015 report in a lot of different media sources. And some were like lamenting that this would potentially keep him out of playing for USC for the rest of the year. So it's not a reach to think that his privileged position within a very expensive California university and being a star football player potentially afforded him this very privileged kind of treatment that then kind of extended into what occurred recently and him being an NFL player.
One of the other things, Jennifer, that's been lost in this story too is the NFL and the Seahawks organization really weak sauce response to this. And another thing on the NFL, we celebrated Amanda Gorman on Monday and her poem that she did. It was a magnificent poem. She is truly somebody saying the words that I believe America needs to hear at this point. I think it's unfortunate a lot of people probably aren't listening. But I had this thought. It's like, oh, okay, we have a poet, we have Amanda Gorman. This is really good. But you guys still destroyed Colin Kirkpatrick. You destroyed Colin Kirkpatrick for taking a knee over the national anthem. And then, of course, the response from the right was, well, you can't do that. That's disrespectful. And then when people started protesting in the streets, it was like, why can't they just peacefully protest? Oh, you mean like take a knee for the national anthem? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to go off in this whole tangent here and take away from the story, but the NFL has kind of been like, not it in this, right? And it's like, well, the Seahawks, but it's like when you follow it, it's like, no, the Seahawks didn't exactly like cut him off on December 31. It's not. It's like, it's one of those things like contractually, it's not accurate, but it's not inaccurate, right? It's like this little gray space. And what he did, I mean, like, this is worse than Ray Rice.
Yeah, no. And I just want to say thank you to the people in the comments that pointed out that it is Brock Turner, because I could not remember his last name. And also it's Colin Kaepernick. They corrected you as well. So we both got a correction there. Yeah, so this whole thing is particularly problematic, and I completely understand why Aaliyah Taylor still continues to fear for her safety, and I will talk a little bit about that after we watch a little bit of her interview, because she did an interview on CBS this morning, which we got an email about asking us to amplify, and she talks about her experience, which it's an extremely difficult interview to watch. We have a clip of that, and then we can kind of, I guess, unpack that afterwards.
Yeah, I want to just go ahead and say, I know we've already rolled the warning before this segment. This is a tough segment. This aired on CBS This Morning. Yesterday, CBS This Morning, which is the national, they actually reached out to us directly and asked us to amplify this. That it's a big moment for us as a news organization. And so, but this is a really hard clip to watch. We don't have the whole interview. The whole interview is available on YouTube if you want to see all of it. And with that, Jennifer, I'm going to roll the clip.
Her name is Aaliyah Taylor, and it was a leaked photo of her injuries that made national headlines. Well, now she's ready to share her story. And most importantly, she wants domestic violence survivors to know they're not alone. We want to warn you, some of what you're about to see and hear is graphic.
I still have to regularly get like my concussion checked. I have bolts and a steel plate I'm going to have forever in my arm. I'm going to have to deal with this the rest of my life.
That's the reality for 27-year-old Aaliyah Taylor after she says she was attacked by her then boyfriend, Chad Wheeler. Taylor says the pair dated for 6 months with barely any arguments.
We were like best friends. We did everything together. I even introduced him to my family. We would babysit my nephew together.
But according to Taylor, that all changed on January 22nd, starting with a text from Wheeler that he'd shaved his head.
He loved his long hair, refused to cut it, and it surprised me and it worried me. I came home and Chad was trying to play it off as if he just kind of cut his hair, but then as time went on throughout the day, he started going downhill emotionally.
Taylor later told police it was the beginning of a manic episode, adding she knew Wheeler suffered from bipolar disorder. Then, according to Taylor, Wheeler snapped into a dark place.
He stood up and he told me to bow down, and I asked him why, and he didn't respond. He just told me to bow down again, and I told him no, and he immediately grabbed my neck, and that's when things began.
Do you recall what happened after that?
When he grabbed my neck, he threw me on the bed, and I remember looking up at him and asking him, "Please stop, Chad, it's me." And I just immediately knew the look in his eyes, that was it.
According to Taylor, she blacked out twice before the attack was over.
I had touched my face, and I looked down, and there was blood on my hand. And I remember getting up and running to the bathroom. Chad was standing by the bed, by the doorway, and he was sipping his smoothie. And was like, "Wow, you're still alive."
Please help me now. I'm gonna die.
It's tough to watch. That 911 call is tough to listen to, and there was actually a lot more in that interview. That whole news piece that CBS did is about six and a half minutes. And again, if you want to, it's very easy to find on YouTube. You could literally just type in Chad Wheeler CBS. It's the first thing that comes up over there. Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you to unpack.
Yeah, so I'm not going to pick apart the details of everything she talks about that she endured at the hands of this man who is twice her size, literally. But I just want to talk about how extremely brave it was what she did to go on national TV and to talk about this, because somebody who has lived it, even 12 years later, like watching that interview and watching her describe some of the things that happened, it's not just the physical repercussion, the steel plates in her arms, the having to check her concussion or any physical side effects that she suffered that she's going to have to live with the rest of her life. It is the emotional and psychological toll that it's going to take on her. And so to have to recount that story and to maybe even have to recount it multiple times to get the word out is extremely traumatic. I know what she's going through. And so people will tell you to talk about it. It's cathartic. And yeah, it's cathartic to an extent when there are people there, but that doesn't combat, the hypervigilance when you wake up in the middle of the night, or the dreams, or the inability to trust somebody because of the things that have happened to you at the hands of somebody else. So I just want to say what an extremely bold and brave move it was for her to go out and speak about that and to get the word out and to let other people who are experiencing domestic violence know that they are not alone. But I also understand her ongoing concern for her safety, because from my experience, when I ended the relationship with the abuser and left, that was not the end of it. He actually went on to abuse somebody else and nearly killed another woman and went on the run and tried to find me again. So I understand the concerns for her safety. I understand that this is something she's going to have to, worry about for as long as he is out of jail. And right now he's looking at 12 years in jail, but we know that that is not what he is going to get. So I just want to say to her, that is an extremely brave thing that you did. And I'm not going to sit here and recount and dissect all of the things that happened to you, like have been done in the comments on the excerpts of interviews that I've seen on YouTube, which is absolutely appalling and disgusting. But it was extremely brave what she did. I am so proud of her for that. I hope that she continues to recover and get the emotional support that she needs, that she's going to need moving forward. Before the show, I gave the Moz the link to the National Violence Domestic Hotline, and I hope they'll put that up in the comments for us. Just know that if you are having issues with domestic violence, that you are not alone. There are resources that you can utilize. There are places you can go. And yeah, that's all I've got right now. It's a little bit hard to talk about.
Yeah, Jennifer, you're doing great work uncovering this story. I know it's a hard story for you to cover. I know that I'm glad that you are being an advocate for this critical topic. If you are dealing with domestic violence, whether you are male or female, domestic violence against men is real. It's not as prevalent as it is with women. However, it is considered largely underreported because a lot of men don't want, because of the whole male thing, they don't want to admit that they're experiencing it. Current statistics are 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 7 men. So it is a serious problem. If you're experiencing domestic violence, the phone number is 1-800-799-7233. That number again, that's a national phone number, 1-800-799-7233. If you go to their website, which is thehotline.org, they do have a pop-up that goes on there that says, if you call on your regular device, if somebody's watching you, they're going to know that you made that call. And they have guidance on there on how to safely make a call that the record won't be on your phone when you make that call. And if you're in that much danger, then you do need to, unfortunately, you need to think ahead. But don't let it be a barrier to you to make that call. Get the help. Get out.
Just one more thing, the website is great because they have a giant X. So if you're doing it and somebody comes in the room, you can click on it quickly and get out. They remind you to clear your browser history. There's a lot of different reminders so that you can go and check out these resources and not have somebody find out. Because I know from my own experience, everything I did was monitored and controlled, which is a very common thing in domestic violence situations. And so they're really good about reinforcing those reminders. So yeah, don't be... seek help. That's my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer, thank you once again for that. We're going to do a pause for the cause, and we're going to go to our last segment.
Said, hey, we're gonna have to start moving people, and then a couple other people came in and we were like, wow, this exploded fast.
Can You Hear Us is our documentary that we have done, which covers the events that happened in Seattle from June 1st to July 4th. Those events will be forever marked on the history of Seattle. Patrons have access to it now. Everyone else will have access to it at the end of February. And as I've said before, it might go into the first couple of days of March. If you want early access to Can You Hear Us, you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month, and you can help us keep independent media independent. I would like actually make a shout out to two people. I know one is Mary, and I want to get the other name right, so you're going to have to forgive me as I glance down on my notes here. I do want to thank, because I want to make sure we call them out, Athena, and I want to thank Mary. Athena and Mary were both very generous on our Venmo today, and it is very, very much appreciated.